John with ProCraps here. We're going to continue talking about bankroll and money management, focusing in this session on the rack. I think through the years, personal experience for sure, I had mismanaged my rack for years. I didn't really get how important this piece of equipment was as part of my overall strategy. You leak money from your rack without realizing it because you don't set it up in such a way that you can tell how much money you've got in there. Just lining up your chips isn't giving you the information that you need to know if you're on strategy, if you're off strategy, if you're ahead, if you're behind, how much you're ahead, how much you're behind, have you met your goals yet? Setting up your rack to give you the knowledge that you need to make better decisions out there is one more step towards becoming a professional level craps player. And that's what we want. It's the one game in the casino where you have one of these to play with. Every other game, you can stack your chips up and count them however you want to. With craps, it can be a mess sometimes. So I want to focus on rail management. I'm going to show you the ways that I set up my rack, my rail to manage my money, and the ways that I use my rail to keep me on point, on strategy, and focused on where I am. I think that it gives me an edge beyond the strategy that I play, beyond the way I throw the dice. It's an edge that I have just in knowledge and knowing where I am, so I don't let them beat me by me beating myself. And I think having poor rail management is a way that you can beat yourself very easily by just not knowing what you've got in here. So let's head to the table and take a look at the way that I set things up and how I let money flow through my rack and hopefully into my pocket. See you at the table. Let's look now at how we can better manage our money while we're at the table in the rack here. So before you, I've got a sample of a rack that probably looks pretty familiar. I know I've done this over the years. It's good in some respects because you feel like you're probably winning when your rack looks this way. Things are happening pretty quick at a craps table. You're reaching in, you're grabbing money, you're dropping it up here, you're not paying that much attention to it. The thing I worry about when I see this though is that we're not paying that much attention to it. And it's hard to discern at a glance what's going on in your rack. Like, you know how it is at a craps table. You're talking to your neighbors, you're ordering drinks, you're high-fiving folks and everything else, and you want to get a sense of where you are at any point in time during the game. So I look at this rack, I have no idea what's going on here. And even if you took a breath and organized it, so when I say organize it, your mind's probably picturing something like this, where you visually kind of separate the chips by their denominations and say, yeah, okay, now I'm organized. I would ask you the same question, how are you doing? You bought in for 300, what do you have here? Well, it feels like it's about 300 or so. I'm probably up or down a few bucks is what you might say. It's tough, right? It's tough to make good decisions when you don't have good information. And I want to repeat that. Knowledge is power. And you can use your rack in a better way than this to give you knowledge and let you know where you are. Another thing I see frequently at tables is folks playing a strategy where they'll sort of start with all their money at one side or in the back or whatever, and they're just going to kind of bet and take their wins and rack it up, and take their next bet, take their wins and rack it up, and kind of run through all their session money, and at the end say, okay, here's what I ran through it all, and here's what I have left. And that's one way of doing it. I started with 300, I ended up with, whatever this is, 240 or something like that. That's an okay way. I see most strategists that I watch on YouTube actually do it this way. They'll start with a starting bankroll, they'll play through the whole bankroll, and they'll count their winnings at the end, which is fine, except for you don't know in the heat of that battle how you're doing. I hear people all the time say, well, it feels like we're doing pretty good right about now. Well, I would like to know how I'm doing right about now. And that's a key part of the way that I play, and a way that I feel like levels me up and it makes those of us who do it this way more pro-level kind of players. So let me show you how I organize my rack here. I'm going to take all this money out, and I'm going to buy in here for $105. I'll show you why in a second. We're going to buy in for $105. Again, at different denominations or different play values or play levels, you'll buy in for 100 or 550 or whatever you're going to do. The reason why I do this level here is this. I'm going to put this into my rack, and the singles here, or the smaller stack, I put that into this this quadrant of the rack that's closest to me on the left-hand side. Now I'm going to separate my rack into what's called quadrants here. Quadrant 1 is designed to be used for non-gambling funds. This is the tip for the cocktail that's coming. This is my dealer pass line bet, or my dealer come with me through the come kind of bet, right? This is all non-gambling funds. This is the cost of doing business. The money that's my bankroll, I put that in the rear right-hand side, closest to my right hand. I'm right-handed. This is where it goes to me. And this is my bankroll will be here. Okay, this quadrant is for bankroll. I never bet from this quadrant. I only bet from the fourth quadrant, or the third quadrant here, which is the front left, which is the money that I'm going to use for each shooter. Now, we talked a while back about the rule of tens. I think everybody on YouTube who's doing craps videos will tell you the same thing. Have enough money for 10 shooters. So what does that actually mean? In practice, it means if 4 is my number per shooter, I'm going to bet with this 4 chips, and that's it on that shooter. If I'm going from a giant stack and I'm just kind of feeding the table, you've got to mentally keep track of how many you've bet on that shooter. I actually put a whole part of my rack separated just for the money that I've allotted for the current shooter, and that's it. I only bet from here onto the table, only ever it comes from here. And in fact, my winnings from the table only ever come to this section. This is kind of my table in and out. This is the door for the table. Should I happen to win, let's say we had a pretty good session, we pulled some money back, my profits would go over to the right. Okay, there's the use of the 4 quadrants. Okay, bankroll, current shooter money, profits, and kind of tip and play money. That's okay. I'm still not getting the level of information that I want, because I don't know, looking down here at the way the rack is currently set up, how many shooters do I have and how well am I actually doing? That's an important bit. If you're playing a strategy where you've got a certain dollar amount set aside per shooter, you want to know how many shooters you've got. So what I've done is I've actually bought these, and I bring them with me to the casino now. These are acrylic. Hope you can see that. These are acrylic spacers. You've probably seen those at the baccarat or the blackjack table, where the dealers will use those in their racks, the dealer racks, to separate their chips. I thought that's a great idea. Why don't I do it for myself? So what I do now is when I buy in, I'm going to separate my bankroll into segments with these separators so I can visually see how many shooters I've got left. Now I'm going to pretend to do a strategy here that is a 4 chip per shooter strategy, and instead of the rule of 10, we're doing the rule of 5 just to save time and space. You can look down. You've got the bird's eye view. I got the camera set nice and low and directly over top of the rack, so you should be able to see those visual separations between the chips. That's a critical factor for me, to look down and say, well, my strategy was 5 shooters. I've got all 5 shooters left. I have every bite of that apple is available to me right now. I like knowing that. It also makes it easy to pick out 1 shooter's worth of money. So as I'm playing through my strategy, take a shooter's worth of money, put it in the front left, and now I'm playing with that money. So let's play a little bit here. And again, the actual dollar amounts here are less critical. Let's go for like a 30% win or something, right? So let's drop 5 in the field. Like I'll do like a quick field roll, and then I'll simulate to save time. That's great. Boxcars we get. That pays us. And again, money came from my rack in the front, and it will come from the table back to that same section. This is always where my money comes for a given shooter. So I'm still out in the field. We'll roll again. That's a 6, which is a field loser. I'll replenish. A 6, which is another field loser. Replenish again. There's an 8, which is another field loser. There is an 8, another field loser. So learning 2 lessons here. One is the field is not your friend. And another loser in the field. And our last $5 will hopefully do good, and we 7 out. That's actually what always happens when you bet the field. Anyway, so we lost, right? We threw 4 chips worth of money out there for the shooter, and we lost on that shooter, which is a bummer. But it does showcase where we kind of are now. Now I can look at my rack and say, well, cool. You know, I brought 5 shooters worth of money with me. I've only lost 1, so we can go again. Now we just move up to our next shooter. And our rack sort of feeds itself from section to section. Let's run that same strategy now with this next shooter here. I'm going to simulate the rolls just to show you how the rack gets managed. This is less about, obviously, field strategy and more about the rack management. So let's say that through the course of this shooter having money in and out of the table, let's say that we have profited about this much. Let's just say we did okay and we've got some earnings from that shooter. When they 7 out, this is what I'm left with. Now, I look at my rack and say, well, I did okay on that shooter, but I'm not doing that great over here, okay? I've got 3 shooters worth of money left, 3 arrows in the quiver, as it were. My first priority after a shooter ends is to evaluate my rack and see where I am. And my number one goal is to make sure that I have my initial buy-in replenished. So I'm going to look at, I have 3. I'm going to try and get as close to 5 shooters again as I can by taking from here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 shooters. I'll separate again and pull 4 more chips out. And now we can see that I've got my 5 shooters back. So I've replenished my starting bankroll. I'm back to even now. If anybody comes up, like your significant other walks up, hey, how you doing over here? We're like, well, I'm even, right? You can look right down and know exactly where you've got. The visual nature of those separators to me is where it's at. And I've got a $5 profit, which slides over to the profit section for now, okay? Looking at my rack, I've got, again, tip money. My initial bankroll is secured. I've got a tiny bit of profit. I'm not near my goal yet, so I keep playing. I take what I've replenished now and I go back out with it. And again, let's simulate some more play. And let's say that, again, let's say that we crush it one more time. Let's say we won all this money through the course of playing the field. Let's say the field worked this time. We did great. Again, we 7'd out. My first priority is to replenish my bankroll. So pull 4 off of that, right? Take that shooter's money essentially and put it back where it came from, right? Replenish the bankroll. So now I've got a pretty good set or a pretty good eyeball that I'm even, plus a little extra. Now I'll slide this over to my profit section. And I will use the separators in my profit section as well to give me another visual indicator of how much profit I've got. I like to see, and I don't like to do visual, I don't like to do math. So I'm going to separate this into segments that could be colored up. So in this case, I've got 5 red chips, which is a quarter, another 5, which is a quarter, and then a single. If I was playing with greens, I would separate these by 4s. So each segment is $100. If they were blacks, I would do it in 5s. Again, each segment is what it could be colored up to. So now I can look and say, hey, my wife from there, how you doing, John? Well, good. I'm up $55. No question, right? I can look right down and say I know it because I can see that separation here. That's a quarter, and whatever's in front of that adds on to it. I know that I'm even because I've got my session bankroll separated clearly, and I know exactly how many shooters I've got left. I had back to my 5. I've got 55 in profit. If I'm on a 50% strategy, which is insane, but let's say that I can walk. I've actually exceeded 55% in this little field game that we played, and I'm free to leave. My rack has given me the information I need to make that decision. There was never a point in time where I knew or didn't know how many shooters I was able to survive. There was never a point in time when I didn't know if I had any profit and how much profit I had. And there was never a point in time where I wasn't sure if I had enough money to bet for the dealers. Right now, again, I didn't demonstrate betting, but I know I've got this over here. I'm not willy-nilly taking money out of my stacks to throw out there, right? I've pre-planned some tip money. And if I'm playing a strategy that's paying me in whites, like if I'm 6 and 8 betting or whatever else, and I'm getting whites, I usually will stash some of those over here and kind of grow this stack a little bit so I can bet for the dealers even more as I'm going. I'll use this to pay VIGs. This is just kind of, again, it's kind of non-gambling active money. This is money that kind of just gets used as we go as a way to kind of grease the skids, as you will, as it were, for the game. So that's my rack management strategy. I really like the quadrant system. Bankroll here, active money here, profits here, tip money here. And again, the separation gives me a visual on how I'm doing. Now, if you don't want to buy the lammers, that's fine. You can use singles. You can use white chips in there too. White chips will stand out, so visually you can see that you've got 2 segments in there. The white chips, you have to kind of mess with them to get things to flow nice like this. So I prefer the acrylics to the white chips, but those are fine. The acrylics also serve another job here, which is, let's say you're on some kind of a count system, right? Let's say you're doing, let's say you're doing the 5 count that Golden Craps or Golden Touch recommends that you use. This is a great way to do it, right? You got your extra acrylics here. You can just roll them out, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now I'm betting in the come, right, on a random shooter. Let's say that you're on a strategy where you've gone all the way across and you're going to take 5 hits and pull down. Again, in the heat of the game and you're talking to people and everything else, and you take, 1 hit, you take 2 hits, you take 3 hits, you take 4 hits, and now you're holding it, you're on the money shot, right? That shooter rolls it, you get that 5th hit, pull your money back. These are another way to use your rack to let you know what's going on. And again, information is power, right? I have tip money, I have session money, I have profits, and I know exactly where I am. And I know that when there's 4 chips out here, the next one is when I pull my money down. So I use these also to kind of help me keep track of where we are in the game as well. So use all the tools that you've got at your disposal to give yourself information to make better choices. And again, the visual separation, the looking down at that rack and knowing instantly where you are and where you stand, that just prevents so much leakage, and you can relax, right? When you don't have this going on and you're not sure where you are, you can relax. You know that you're good. You know what you've got. You know you've got your even plus some. Here, God only knows what you got there, right? It feels good. You got chips everywhere. Maybe you're doing okay. Maybe you're not. I would rather know how I'm doing. So that's a look at the way I manage my racks. If you have comments or other ideas or strategies that you use instead, I'd love to hear about it. Use the comment section. If you like what we had to say today, drop us a like on the video. We love that. But more importantly, it's the comments. As you know, I'm a software developer and a teacher. And I can tell you this, with my students, I learn so much and have become such a better teacher of computer programming because of the comments and the feedback that I get from my students. I really enjoy hearing their perspectives and hearing what resonates, good and bad, right? It helps us to improve things. So I look at this like we're as part of a big community. Let's work together to make things better and share information. So hopefully this works for you. It will take some practice, right? When you're in your practice sessions, you're going to have to work your rack like I just did during practice. And I will tell you this again, and I have a whole video on how to practice. Practice like you play. When you're in your practice sessions, use your rack just like you do just like you would in a casino. Matter of fact, go buy one. These are like 15 bucks. Go buy yourself a nice wooden rack and work it this way. It's a small investment, but you're using the same tool you're going to use at the casino. That's a big deal. So anyway, thanks again for your time and your attention. And as I said, see you in the comment section, and more importantly, we'll see you at the tables.